Okay, so we're on session number 3. We're going to talk about identity and what it means to bring your identity as yourself and then bring that into your entrepreneurship and as a couple. So first big question, you guys both came out of foster care, and I know you shared your story a lot of different ways, and you had to develop, you had to pivot, you had to adjust, and that helped you to do those pivots and adjusting as entrepreneurs. But you also had to open yourself up a little bit more to be around other people. Alexis, you talk a lot about the network of people you've surrounded yourself with. Opening your heart up after being hurt is really a tough aspect. So talk about that identity, how that identity came from I'm just a foster kid to I have value and I'm bringing value to the world.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of us, whether you grew up in foster care or not in foster care, our identity is based on who our family is, what our parents tell us we were. One of her friends told us that as an adult, one of the voices in the back of our head is always our parents talking to us and telling us who they think we are, and she'll tell you the exact quote. But it's so much of who our family shaped us to be, and for a lot of us, you know, our family and our parents may not have shaped us to be the best person or that well of an adult or that good a character. So really, it's developing identity is about just taking time to yourself, not around other people so they can influence you. You know, when a lot of young adults, they get into either college or a certain atmosphere and they're on their own and they don't have that family influence, they kind of just adapt to their environment. And a lot of times their environment is not the best one. So really it's just taking time to yourself and just figuring out, okay, what are the things that my family kind of is natural to me, that my family raised me to be and shaped me to be, and is this something that is good for me? Is this something that is healthy for me, something that will sustain me long term? And when we talk about faith, we want to think about there's always a cost to growth, and when you want to grow, you have to be uncomfortable. You have to really challenge yourself. And being in those toxic environments that may be natural to a lot of people, something that is comfortable may not always be the best. You know, whenever you want to do better in life, whenever you want to find more about yourself, who you are, you always find out more about yourself. You always grab another piece of you after you go through a trial or tribulation, right? So you experience, especially in like a year like 2020, when a lot of us have had our hardest years and the hardest moments of our lives and losing loved ones and going through so much. And honestly, we just got married on August 8th. And a week after our wedding, I lost my mom and she was murdered. And we learn so much about ourselves through these trials and tribulations. And it really challenges you to disrupt your character and who you are. And I think that's when you really need to figure out what is a solid foundation. And really for us, spirituality and seeking God has really been a solid foundation. And the Bible talks a lot about rejecting ourselves and becoming one with God. And when you think about God, you think about patience, you think about seeing the best in people, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And the key part of that part is loving yourself and really enjoying who you are. A lot of people, they see that scripture and they think about loving your neighbor, but really you have to love yourself before you love your neighbor, because you don't know how to love your neighbor if you don't love yourself.
Right. Amen. And I love that.
Yeah. So a lot of the principles of love that the Bible talks about is patience, no records of wrong, not being envious, and being kind to other people. And really you have to internalize that and think of yourself in that way of, okay, am I kind to myself? Am I patient with myself when I do wrong or when I mess up or when I'm going through these trials and tribulations? Am I patient with myself, or am I going through these trials and tribulations, or it's just a knee-jerk reaction, right? When my mom died, there's a lot of addiction in my family. I think my mom was on drugs and her mother was on drugs. And my dad was a domestic abuser and his dad was the domestic abuser. And I don't even know how long it goes on beyond that. Right. But it's so many generations. And it's like, for me, it would be almost natural for me to turn to drugs, or for me to take out my anger or my heart or my sadness on my wife. It would be almost natural for me to do those things. But you really have to just challenge yourself to overcome those trials and tribulations and be patient and be loving, be kind and be thoughtful and intentional with your thoughts on every single situation, every single day, because there were days where I just wanted to just lash out and do things, or I would say something to Alexis that I don't exactly feel, but just being intentional on the words that I say and every single thought that comes to my head. And I think when shaping your identity, intentionality is a big thing on your thoughts, your behaviors, and just challenging yourself to overcome those trials and tribulations.
Mm-hmm. And as he mentioned, so much of our identity comes from our childhood and from our parents. And I know too many adults that spend their entire adult life healing from their childhood. And that was something for us that we didn't want to do. And so that was the main motivation behind writing this book is there's such a high percentage of marriages that fail, and us being foster youth and the reality that most people go to other people to fill their voids and to have somebody love them and fill their needs, that we wanted to make sure that we were who we needed to be for ourselves first before we could come together in marriage. And so that's why we wrote the book as alternating perspectives, so we could show people that we had to go through individual journeys of healing and self-discovery before we could come together. So we made that physically clear in the book. And for me, so much of my identity came from my biological father, who was incredibly abusive as a kid. He was mentally, emotionally, and sexually abusive and for 8 years. And so that taught me fundamentally that love hurts and you don't trust, and it's also transactional. And so growing up into my romantic relationships, it was transitioning into that. And so I was from 13 to 22, I was dating a guy, and it was very abusive. And so it was an 8-year abusive relationship. And I mean, it was just 8 years of hell. But the entire time, no matter what he said, no matter what he did, I believe that I deserve that. And I believe that no matter what, love hurts. And that's my identity. That's part of who I am. And so it wasn't until I went to South Africa and I had to learn to like myself and to love myself. That was the first time that I was forced to do things alone and be alone. And I'm away from every single person I know and I love. And that was ungodly hard. It was really difficult for me, but I'm so grateful for it, because I was there for 5 months, and through that entire time, when I first got there, the first 2 weeks I cried every day because it was so hard. Then the last 2 weeks when I was leaving, I cried every day because I didn't want to leave. It was just such a night and day situation. And the day that I got home from South Africa, my ex was living in my apartment rent free, and I kicked him out. And I decided this is the day I'm choosing myself. This is the day that I'm choosing God. And I started going to Bible study and church every week and all these things. And that's when I asked my pastor to be my mentor, which led to her speaking life into me of being a business owner and being an author, which I don't know if it ever would have happened if she didn't speak that into us, or at least into me and then him. And so it's pivotal moments like that. And then 1 week after I broke up with my ex, I met Justin. And it was setting that concrete foundation of who is my identity and what is it rooted in, and it's not rooted in a man. And so I told Justin when I met him, I said, we're not dating. I don't want a boyfriend. I don't want to be with somebody, because I need to figure out who Alexis is. For too long, my identity and my soul has been wrapped in another individual. And I didn't find out until I was in high school that my mom committed suicide, and so did my grandma. And I was suicidal all throughout college, or all throughout high school. And I went to the hospital several times because I was suicidal, and I was on medications and all these things. And I didn't know that at that time that was a history in my family. So I didn't know that. And maybe I would have sought help sooner if I would have known that was something I was predisposed to. But then also there's this thing called the ACEs assessment, if you've ever heard of that, where it's adverse child experiences. And basically it's an assessment of the trauma that you've gone through, and you get a number score, and it tells you that depending on the score that you get, it's what you're predisposed to. And so I got the highest score of a 10 and Justin got a 9. Wow. And it basically is meaning that we're predisposed to domestic violence and addiction and alcoholism and obesity and all these these negative things. And if we're not careful and we don't heal and take care of that crap before we come together, then these things will happen most likely. And I've seen that in my family, with my brother, with other family members, and then with his family and other things that, I see these things play out in other people's lives, that we had to see what is our identity rooted in. And that's why every single chapter of the book, it says, what do the statistics say? And then what does God say? Because the statistics are telling us that this is our identity. This is what we are rooted in of the world and where we should be and where we're going to end up. But what does God say about that? He has the final word, and he's going to tell us where we're going to be and what we're going to do. And so it's our faith that has brought us through where we are and brought us where we are today. Yeah. And we do little things like every single night we hold hands and we pray together, and that keeps us grounded and that keeps us together. And even if we're upset and mad at each other, how do you stay mad at somebody if you're holding hands with them? Like, so that's a way to help break down that barrier. And when we're angry and upset at each other, we hold hands to make sure that we're still grounded and here together. And it's little things like that. And that's so huge to me, because I grew up where the only way that you communicate is to scream and yell and to say the meanest things that you can say to the other person to win. It was always a winning game, but in reality, nobody wins. And I tried that with him. It didn't work. Our first argument, I started screaming and yelling at him, and he walked out, and he came back in and said, "You will never speak to me that way, because I will never speak to you that way. I respect you, and I expect that from you. And if you can't handle that, then we shouldn't be together." He set an expectation, because part of his identity is that he grew up in a very toxic and unhealthy environment, same as me, but he knew that he needed better and expected better. And I wasn't used to having men have positive expectations of me. It was always negative expectations. And so that began to shape my identity even further of who is Alexis and why do I communicate that way, questioning what is normal in my life, questioning really every aspect of the way I communicate, the way I handle situations. I used to get suspended from school for fighting and all these things. And now I'm like, why did I do that? Because it was my identity that when you're upset, you fight physically. That's how you handle things. And so we in premarital counseling, we sat down with our pastors, and he said, I need you to write down every red flag and every not red flag. It was every generational curse that's in your family. And what are you going to do to be proactive to make sure that it's not going to continue in your marriage and to your kids? Because we refuse to pass that down. Yeah. And so for us, it was a long list. I bet. Yeah. And it was, how can we be intentional on that? And how can we be each other's accountability partners? Because to me, that's the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things together is he's my accountability partner in everything, with my faith, with my business, with self-care. He's constantly reminding me to go to sleep, to take a minute for yourself, go for a walk. Have you prayed today? It's just having that person in your ear that loves you and is speaking from such a positive place that helps with shaping your identity as well.
That's cool. So did you guys you said that, what was the name of that test again?
Oh, ACEs assessment. ACES. Yeah. ACEs.
I've never heard that one. But did you take any other like personality tests, like the 16 personalities or any of those kind of things?
Oh yeah, I took Myers-Briggs, and then I took like the strengths assessment and things like that.
Did they help you, or did they kind of confuse you? What do you think?
Oh no, I love them. They were incredibly helpful. Like with the Myers-Briggs, helps me understand what is my personality and how does that operate like in a group dynamic, and even with my relationship with Justin. But then also the strengths assessment, it gave me, I think it was my top 5 strengths, and why are those my strengths? But then how your strengths can also be your weakness. Like for me, one of my greatest strengths is that I love information, and I kind of hoard it, but then I expect other people to process information in the same way that I do. And so I used to post like 20 times a day and just throw information and opportunities at people. And I'm like, you're going to process this the same way as I am. That's not how people work. So it's understanding what are my strengths and how does having that strength equal, if it's too much, a weakness. What about you?
Well, I've taken a strengths assessment. Well, I didn't take the strengths
assessment.
Didn't. It was like I took a career assessment. I haven't taken too many personality assessments. Only assessment I've taken again is the ACEs, and it's really pretty much the only one I've taken.
Yeah, there's one on site. It's called 16personalities.com. It's literally the number 16.
Okay, I'm gonna write that.
It's the INFJ and all the 4 number things.
Oh, okay.
But it's free and it's easy to take, and it's just a little thing. I find that it's not necessarily the end result, but it's the answering the questions through there that helps reveal truth to myself.
Yeah.
In today's world, we're inundated with social media and our cell phones. We have something on our side at all times. So we don't have time to process, especially ourselves. We never take time to process ourselves, and we miss out on that opportunity. Look at the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
People had time to reflect. People had time to interact. People had time to introspect how God lived around them and through them. In our world, we don't see that. We're just, we think something, we're going to stick it on social media. We think something, we're going to stick on social media, and we never process, is that worth putting out there? Is that something going to help someone or not help someone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with that, the processing, like for me, I used to journal, but then I stopped for a long time because when I wrote something down, it made it real, and I can't take it away. And so that meant I didn't have to deal with it. I didn't have to reflect on it. And so my mentor, one of my mentors in college, actually through the Seed of Scholars program that I mentioned earlier, he would, every time I would come in his office, he would say, Alexis, what are you doing for yourself? What are you doing for self-care? Have you been journaling? Have you been dealing with stuff? And every time I'm like, can we talk about school? Like, I'm good at school. I excel at school. I'm an A student. School has been my coping mechanism my whole life because that's the one thing that nobody could take away from me. I'm good at that. But yet I'm crying in the bathrooms and I'm staying to myself and I'm depressed and I'm on medication and this and that. But I'm not dealing with things. And so that's another way that he was holding me accountable. But I started to journal again and had that point of reflection. And that's when actually I started journaling about the same time that we started writing the book, because I said, if I'm going to write this book, I need to do it and I need to go all in. And we essentially are printing our diary. That's exactly what it's like. This is our diary we're sending out to the world and the masses. So I hope that other people can take something from our journey. And a huge part of the book, actually probably the biggest part of the book, is our identity and how do we define that and how have we come to that individually before we could come together. Because now that we're married, we're one, but we're individual people. And we have individual needs and wants and faith journeys. And I can't expect him to fulfill all things that I need, and just in the same way that he can't with me. And that's the reason why we go to individual counseling and we do things on our own to take care of ourselves, because we have to in our own right.
Great. Justin, you have anything to add there before we end up here?
I mean, she covered a lot. So, and, I think that, we covered a lot. And I think that just within the book, and we talk about just individual identities and just the process of figuring out who we are. And one of the biggest things that I just reread this chapter of the book about a day or two ago, and I call it a Jesus in the desert moment. When Jesus is fasting and he's getting ready to go over he's getting ready to do amazing things in life. And I think we all need that moment where we're just kind of off to ourselves, and we're just either, if you believe in fasting and praying, just off to yourself and just focusing on what God is saying to you and just individual growth. I think that we all need that Jesus in the desert moment where we're just like focusing on ourselves and building that spiritual endurance to really take on those trials and tribulations that we're getting ready to face.
I agree. What's your favorite chapter in the book, Alexis?
I would say finding when we talk about finding a partner, just because like he gets all gushy and cute and talking about like his process of choosing a partner and his expectations and how I've pushed him to help him grow and really reveal the man that he's always been inside, and just bringing that out. And that's what your partner should always do is compliment you in that way and reveal what's already in you versus transforming or changing you, because that's not the purpose of a relationship. And so I just really love that chapter. It made me cry. it was really cute.
All right, remind us how we find your book.
You go to re-definingnormal.com. The book is called Redefining Normal: How Two Foster Kids Beat the Odds and Discovered Healing, Happiness, and Love.
And it's going to be on Amazon in what date?
Yep, it's going to be on Amazon on November 9th.
Yes.
November 9th. So y'all check out her book, pre-order it. If you're watching this after that date, go ahead and just order it. You don't have to pre-order it because it's done.
There you go. It's already there.
All right. Thanks, guys, for being on here, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.